Alright, boys, what are we doing, man? What are we doing here? Do you guys hate me? I asked for difficult games, not to take actual years off of my life, which is exactly what I did. Out of every game recommendation you little glazers have thrown at me over the last few videos, this was the one. This was the one game that apparently sat in the deepest, darkest corners of the minds of completionists for years. The game that ruins friendships, childhoods, marriages, probably indefinitely Milky's life. The game that had grown men staring at their CRT televisions in complete silence, wondering where it all went wrong. And after reading all of your guys' comments, I thought to myself, how hard can it really be? Well, imagine fighting Lawrence the First Viker from Bloodborne, but blindfolded and using a controller that has one of its analog sticks snapped right off of it while reciting the alphabet backwards over and over again. And if you somehow manage to beat that, you have to do it again about 10 more times. Okay, that might be a little bit hyperbolic, but yeah, Battletoads. Holy mother of all things sweet, did the devs even play this game? Because I'm convinced they finished it and then tried about 2 levels, but didn't even beat those 2 levels and just said, no, this'll do it for the next 70 years. Hey there, all you beautiful guardians of the glaze. Welcome back to the Milky Donut. If you're new here, this is the Milky Donut. We do all things video games, movies, and pop culture. And if you're not new here, you're not getting a compliment in this video because that means you've been present and allowed the downfall of my sanity, so you can wait until the next video for your little compliment. But as you might be aware, recently on the channel, I've basically been slowly chipping away at my sanity by playing classic games that all of you guys recommend in the comments sections, most of which have utterly been blowing my mind with just how good they've been. I've been honestly loving it, but before we get into this absolute crime against humanity disguised as a kid's game, kids game. Okay, I just want to say thank you because this series has been blowing up way more than I ever expected it to. The amount of recommendations you guys have been sending me is insane. Seriously, my comment sections basically look like a backlog archive at this point. It's gonna take me some time, but I absolutely do plan on playing as many of these games as I can. And as always, don't forget to like, leave the glaziest of comments, hype the video if you can, and subscribe if you think this video is worthy of the algorithm. Shout out to the subscriber of the week, Mr. DB Butchman, and with all of that beautiful glazed nonsense out of the way, let's get into why Frog Souls has completely altered my brain chemistry and I am now questioning my life decisions. And yeah, I didn't beat it. Not even close, but I did manage to make it slightly further than I thought I would, and where you guys said I would make it to, the Turbo Tunnel. Not far, but I did do it, and not without having my soul removed from my body and realizing that this game was created by literal psychopaths. Now, unlike a lot of the games I've covered recently, I actually knew Battletoads' reputation before playing it. Well, at least as of recently. I had never actually heard of this game until you guys started recommending it to me after my first video in the series. But you guys were talking about it like it was some impossible challenge that's only been beaten a few times over the years. It's one of those games that became legendary specifically because of how brutally difficult it is. And after finally playing it myself, that reputation, it's not exaggerated. Nope. As a matter of fact, I would have actually appreciated a little bit more of a warning from you guys, but you know, I'll let it slide this time. But next time I play a hard game that you guys recommend, you better let me know exactly how it is, okay? Because I might not be able to survive through another experience like this one. This genuinely has to be one of the hardest games that I've ever played. The game came out in 1991 on the NES during the era where games were just built different, because this was back when developers weren't afraid to absolutely slime 10-year-olds into the dirt 5 minutes into the experience. There was no tutorials, basically no checkpoints, no modern accessibility settings, and before you start typing, I know that there's an arcade version of Battletoads which apparently plays completely different and is an absolute quarter muncher, but you guys gotta let me recover, man, because I don't even know where I'd find it to play it, and I just can't, so I'm just gonna ignore that exists right now, and maybe in the future we'll get to it, but we'll see. Now, with all that being said, I do respect this game a lot. Even though I wanted to throw it into the pits of Mordor, I did respect its utter commitment to being insanely difficult. And as always with these NES games, it started off pretty innocent. Immediately, the combat felt surprisingly good for an NES game, and I don't know why I say surprisingly good for an NES game, because by this point I should expect that the game is going to outdo my expectations. The attacks had impact and felt heavy and satisfying when they connected. Enemies would go flying across the screen when you hit them, and I like how when you kick your foot turns into a giant boot, and when you punch your fist morphs into a giant fist. I just liked the animation. The first boss is also extremely unique and cool, with the game switching to Boss Walker's point of view as it tries to gun you down. You basically dodge his crosshair until he's done shooting, and the battle eventually ends with you avoiding a large rock attack that he throws at you, which you then use to attack him with by picking it up and throwing it back, which slowly causes cracks to form on the screen. Once you get 3 good hits in, you beat him, and honestly, I was having way more fun than I thought I would have playing Battletoads. The presentation is actually pretty incredible. The sprites are huge, colorful, and expressive, and the animations are really smooth for an NES title, and again, I say for an NES title as if I don't know by now that a lot of NES games have felt surprisingly smooth upon playing them for the first time. I'm just gonna stop saying for an NES title, they're just good. They're just good. Every level feels visually distinct. The first level wasn't quite as hard as I thought it would be, but that's because I had such high expectations when it came to the difficulty. Little did I know that I hadn't even experienced 1% of what Battletoads was known for yet. Level 2, the Wookiee Hole, shifts the game away from pure beat-em-up gameplay and starts introducing more of what I guess I would call aerial combat mechanics. And I do kind of wish the game kept more of the beat-em-up style gameplay because I was really starting to enjoy that, but I was curious to see where it was going to go. Level 2 takes place inside an underground cavern filled with plenty of dangerous environmental hazards. The entire level is based around the mechanic of rappelling down a long vertical section using a rope, which requires careful movement while avoiding enemies and hazards along the walls. Again, as frustrating as it can be, it looks and feels extremely smooth to play. This stage was noticeably more difficult than the first one though because it demands way more precise positioning and understanding the movement of the enemies and your own attacks. Enemies emerge from walls and attack with very little warning, forcing you to react quickly while also navigating or repel downwards. The stage introduces sections where timing becomes far more important, and this is where I realized that the game is extremely memorization heavy, and I had no idea. I really think the only way to beat this entire game is through sheer memorization of the enemy spawn points and attack patterns and obstacles, but level 2 ends with really no traditional boss because the level itself is basically a boss battle constantly forcing you to adapt, showing you that Battletoads is constantly going to change gameplay styles instead of sticking to one formula. And that led me to the moment you've all been waiting for, the infamous Turbo Tunnel, which is not only the level that made Battletoads legendary, but the one that you guys warned me the most about, and for good reason. Up until this point, the game had felt difficult but manageable. But once you hit the Turbo Tunnel, it suddenly becomes like the game becomes an entirely different beast. The level begins with standard side-scrolling sections before transitioning into the infamous speeder bike sequence when you're basically moving at Mach 2 and expected to dodge like That's the laugh I did about the 777th time that I died, where I just basically hit maniacal laughter level. Yeah, that's what this did to me. You're welcome. Once the bikes appear, the entire game shifts into a high-speed obstacle course that requires literally almost nothing but memorization. And when I say high speed, I mean like high speed. Now, some of you might be aware that I was actually supposed to upload this video almost 2 weeks ago, but I made a post saying that I was postponing it for a week. Well, that week turned into 11 days, and that was because I was stuck in the Turbo Tunnel for days. I was originally gonna upload the video with my thoughts up until that point, but I was like, I can't play 2 levels and then make a video. That's just like ridiculous. But it's like the one game that I think you guys would have actually cut me some slack for. You're like, yeah, it makes sense. That's understandable. But I became so determined to beat this level. I didn't even care. I didn't even care how far I made it afterwards. I just wanted to beat this one level. But there was walls and barriers and ramps that fly towards you at increasingly ridiculous speeds, reaching a point of actual comedy. Like, I started laughing at one point because I was like, bro, there's no way. This is impossible. It's not, but it felt that way. But mechanically, the level tests your reaction speed, but I refuse to believe that you could actually beat this on reaction time alone, unless you're Spider-Man or something, because you have to heavily rely on pattern recognition and precise movement more than anything before it. The difficulty spike here it's probably the most insane difficulty spike I've ever experienced in my entire life. And yeah, there's Dark Souls and Elden Ring and Bloodborne and games like that, but at least those like whoop your ass immediately. Like this game gave you like the illusion. It was like, oh, don't you worry. And then all of a sudden you're playing one of the hardest games ever created. So honestly, I love it. But it gets so difficult because it expects you to memorize obstacle placement through repeated failure. And boy, do I mean repeated. And there's technically no boss at the end, thank God, because the level itself is more than enough. I can't even imagine beating this and then jumping into a boss battle. Nah. Simply surviving the Turbo Tunnel became one of the most defining accomplishments of my adulthood, and I do mean that. And I know how I was as a kid, and there's absolutely zero way that I would have ever beaten this. I was rage quitting over not being able to properly hit combos in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4. If you would have given me this game, I probably would have actually just died, because it's so addictive that I would have kept trying, but I never would have gotten there. And if you beat this as a kid, insane props to you, because, man, you could go up to any girl in the arcade, even if she's with a guy, and just be like, yeah, I beat the Battletoads Turbo Tunnel, and then proceed to snatch the soda out of dude's hand and walk away with your new girlfriend, and there's absolutely nothing he could do about it. Yeah, you versus the guy she tells you not to worry about. But anyways, the controls themselves are actually very responsive for the most part, which I mean, they kind of have to be to make this even remotely possible. It's actually impressive how responsive they are. The bikes move quickly and precisely, so instead of blaming the game, I could only start blaming myself, which feels way worse. Every death became a psychological attack where the game silently whispers, nah, that one's on you, big dog. I swear there were moments where I started seeing the turbo tunnel in my sleep and I'd wake up sweating, and I kept thinking, man, I hope the 8 subscribers that I get from this video is worth it. And of course, it is. You know what? You know how people take DMT to reach an ego death? By the way, YouTube, I'm not condoning the use of any type of drug. I don't do them, and you shouldn't either. But it's the only comparable thing I can think of here. You don't need to blast off into the center of the universe and talk to machine elves. Literally just play Battletoads, and you'll get there. You'll probably get more there. But as frustrating as it was, I also completely understood why this level became legendary. Because once you finally survive sections that were completely destroying you for so many hours, it feels so incredible. I can't remember the last time I had this feeling of success, when you finally beat it just to get, kicked in the face about 2 minutes later. But you know what? I took that 2 seconds of fame and I relished in it. But older games just had such a way of making progress feel so unbelievably earned in a way that just a lot of modern games are afraid to do, except for, I'm sure, like some indie games and Souls-like games. But Battletoads fully expects you to improve through failure. The devs really said, yeah, rent this one, kid. Good luck. You'll be renting this for the next 30 years. But after the life-altering Turbo Tunnel, Arctic Caverns slowed things down ever so slightly. And when I say slows things down, I don't mean it got less hard. I mean it just physically slowed things down, and it focused its energy into other places to make it equally as difficult. It becomes much more methodical, which is equally punishing, just in a different way. The level takes place in an icy underground cave filled with slippery platforms, gaps, and of course lots of moving hazards. And unlike Turbo Tunnel's speed-focused gameplay, this stage emphasized careful movement and patience. One of the core mechanics introduced here involves ice physics, which affects movement and jumping accuracy throughout the level, because rather than stopping on a dime, you slide while stopping, making it harder to gauge your jumps and time your stops. Luckily, years of playing Super Mario Bros. Prepared me for this exact moment. You also encounter sections with moving platforms that are suspended over deadly pits, all while trying to avoid falling icicles, snowmen, boulders, and snowballs, requiring extremely careful timing. Enemy placement became a lot more aggressive as well, with hazards often positioned specifically to knock you into instant death areas. But I finally managed to make my way through it after a little bit of grinding. And by a little bit, I mean a lot. But right when I thought I was in the clear, they throw yet another speed-based level at you. And this is where I would inevitably meet my demise. Surf City immediately changes the pace yet again by introducing another vehicle level, but this time using hovering surfboards instead of speeder bikes. While similar in concept to Turbo Tunnel, Surf City focuses more on jumping between ramps and navigating over large gaps while maintaining momentum. And the level constantly alternates between slower moments and sudden bursts of speed, making it much harder to settle into a rhythm like you can kind of do eventually in the Turbo Tunnel. And I think this is the moment where my spirit finally started to break. The thing about the Turbo Tunnel is that even though it was brutally difficult, because it definitely was, it still felt clean. Every death made sense and I knew what I did wrong. Painful for sure, but understandable. But Surf City felt different. Instead of one focused challenge, it felt like the game started stacking chaos on top of chaos. The hoverboard sections weren't just fast, they constantly changed elevations and threw ramps at weird angles and mixed in walls with tiny reaction windows, and it demanded way more precision than I was mentally prepared for even after surviving the Turbo Tunnel. But the hardest part was that I could slowly feel myself becoming worse and worse the longer that I played. I was also trying to beat Super Metroid and Secret of Mana for my I Only Played Really Old Games video that's coming out this Saturday, so make sure you turn on post notifications for that, but I could feel myself getting burnt out. That's when I realized something very important about old games like this. Difficulty isn't always necessarily the thing that beats you. Exhaustion does. By the time I had reached level 5, I had already spent hours grinding the Turbo Tunnel, hours replaying the same sections over and over, until my brain basically turned into nothing but dough. And when I finally beat it, I think part of me assumed that I had conquered the hard part of Battletoads. Like maybe the game would ease off the gas pedal for 2 seconds and let me enjoy the victory. Hell no. And unlike Turbo Tunnel, I just didn't have the same resilience anymore. Every failure, every death in Surf City felt heavier than the last one, because I was already so mentally drained from everything leading up to it. The game had worn me down, and that's honestly the best way that I can describe Battletoads as a whole. It doesn't just test your skill, it tests your willingness to keep going. Battletoads definitely isn't impossible because clearly people beat it, kids beat it somehow, which is utterly insane to me, and I do think that I can beat this game, and I do plan on beating it eventually, but it's one of those games where you need to take breaks in between, and that's exactly what I'm gonna do. But oddly enough, that actually made me appreciate Battletoads even more, because now I fully understand why this game became such a legendary part of gaming history. And it's not just hard because of fast reactions or tight controls, it's hard because it slowly wears you down mentally over time. The game becomes a battle of endurance where eventually you stop asking, can I beat this, and start asking yourself, do I even have the strength to keep going? Well, for me, by the time I hit level 5, the answer was a solid no. But with that being said, I did genuinely enjoy Battletoads way more than I thought I would. I thought it was just going to be a straight difficulty grind, which it definitely is, but it also played great and looked amazing and was extremely addictive. It held my attention way more than I expected it to the point where I even delayed this video for well over a week just to try to get more done. But let me know if you've ever beaten Battletoads. How far did you make it? Let me know in the comments below, and if you like videos like these and want to contribute to my mental decline, feel free to comment games that you want to see me play and talk about. As always, don't forget to like, hype, comment, and subscribe to become a guardian of the glaze, and I'll see you next time on the Milky Donut.